Outside the club's tiny entrance though, which was in a side road off Oxford Street, Maxie didn't seem quite as cocky as he had earlier. "What do you think?" he said, peering at the forbiddingly drawn thick blue velvet curtain inside the club's doorway. "It looks quite quiet, doesn't it? What time is it?" "It's 9:20, I said, glancing at my Timex. "It's definitely open, but I've only seen 1 or 2 people go in. Perhaps we're too early and there's no sign above the door, is there?" Maxie shook his head. "People must just know," he suggested. Then, after another 5 or 10 minutes of us standing on the curb like lemons, he suddenly took a bold step towards the door and poked his head through the curtain. Traffic whizzed and buzzed past about me, and it was getting quite chilly. I wasn't sure how much longer I wanted to stand there, if we weren't going to at least try and get in. "What's it like?" I asked as Maxie reappeared, but he was none the wiser. "All I can see is a really big fat lady behind a booth reading a really, really big book," he said. "Oh," I felt slightly disenchanted. "So what do you think?" "I think it's War and Peace," he said. "It's very big." "I mean, should we go in? Are we going to risk it? We need to make a decision because I'm not standing outside here all fucking night." I fished around in my satchel for a stray cigarette to no avail, and as I did I noticed a few young men gathering around the door and then stepping inside. I felt envious. "I know what we do," Maxie said, suddenly sounding vaguely self-possessed. "We'll wait till the largest crowd of people go in and then we'll sort of tail along in behind them. How does that sound?" "Mildly feasible," I said flatly. Then a voice from behind us made us both jump. "Hello, my dears, and what do we have here?" We turned around quick and discovered a slight man in a pastel green pantsuit with a sequin trim collar that had clearly seen better days, as had the gentleman himself. 50-ish, I'd have said he was, with a greying coffered barnet and a kind smile. He was carrying a small metal briefcase in one hand and a pair of burgundy slingbacks in the other, and his fingernails were painted to complement the colour of his shoes. "And what are you two divine young men doing outside a place like this of a Friday night, might I inquire?" he said. "You'll not get through that door, that's for a positive. Look at you, you're mere chickens, and it's more than the boss's life worth to let you in. He'd lose his licence." Then the man stepped forward and presented us with his hand as if we might kiss it. There was at least one fancy ring on each of his dainty fingers, and his nails were manicured to unqualified perfection. I noticed his violet eyes, just like Elizabeth Taylor's, I thought, though these were jewels and a rather tarnished crown, set above his slightly mottled, jowly cheeks, and the kind of lines around the mouth that smokers get after 40 years of dragging on ciggies. "I'm Jeanette," he said delicately. "And you two are?" I stepped forward and smiled bravely. "I'm David," I said, "and this is Maxie. Is your name really Jeanette?" The man laughed and pinched my cheek softly. "No, silly," he chuckled. "My mother named me Arthur MacDonald, but to everyone else I'm Jeanette." "Anyway, enough about me. What are you two handsome young fellas doing here? You're not rent, are you? Because if you are, you get nothing coming out of here till gone midnight at least, and even then I should imagine it'll be fairly slim pickings. You'll be better off stalking the dilly." Then he studied us both absorbedly for about 15 seconds while we just stood there, mouths half open. "You don't look much like rent boys," Jeanette finally said, his voice crisp and well presented. "Where do you come from?" "East Dulwich," I blurted proudly. Jeanette smiled. "I thought you had a whiff of the provinces about you, dear," he said. "And what brought you both up to London?" "We got the 176, Maxie said. We've just come up to town for the day and we saw this place in a magazine, so we thought we'd try it out." "We like to dance," I added, as more and more people filed past us into the club. "Do you now?" Jeanette said, putting down his briefcase. "Well, you've got to be 21 to come in here, boys, and besides that, do you know what sort of club this is?" Then he nodded towards me. "I bet you do," he said, "but your pal here looks reasonably innocent. Does he know what he's likely to be up against in there?" "It's a gay club," Maxie said with authority. Jeanette laughed. "Is it now, my darling? And you two want to go in and see what it's all about, do you?" Maxie and I both nodded ardently. "Are you going in, Jeanette?" I asked. "Yes, of course," Jeanette said. "I work here, don't I?" "Doing what?" Maxie interrupted. "Are you a barman?" "No, I'm not a barman," Jeanette laughed. "I'm an entertainer." And he gestured histrionically with both arms. I pop on a few records sometimes if Philip the disc jockey moses up to the office for a wank, and I do the cabaret at 11. Any more questions? Take us in, I said. Take us in with you. What? Go on, will be no trouble, Jeanette, I pleaded, and I helpfully scooped up his briefcase from the pavement. We could be your assistants and carry your bits and pieces, just for half an hour. We both look a lot older than we are. Jeanette shook his head slowly and chuckled to himself. Do you know what? Just for brass neck, I think I might. I think you two boys need to know what you're letting yourselves in for. How old are you, by the way? We're 18, I said. Jeanette, however, didn't look especially persuaded and waved a finger at me. It's not that long since I've seen an 18-year-old boy, dear heart, he said. How old? 16, Maxie confessed haughtily. We're 16, actually. Jeanette said, looking Maxie up and down. I know your type as well. More inches on the cop than miles on the clock. And he handed Maxie the slingbacks and pushed past him. Follow me, the pair of you. So as Jeanette breezed in through the door of the club, Maxie and I followed him swiftly and with our heads down. These two chicks are with me, Lil, Jeanette shouted to the large, rosy lady in the booth behind the curtain, and she never even glanced up from her Tolstoy. We were in. Behind that blue velvet curtain, as it turned out, lay a supernatural and exquisite world that I'd hardly dared believe could ever exist. Red carpeted stairs drew us down towards a swirling throng of dancing, thrusting men of every size and silhouette, the piquant smell of their varied colognes rising up around us as we descended further and further until we were finally swallowed up in the dancing crowd. Pastel lights flashed on, off, on, lustrous and bright against the white shirts and tan skin of the beauteous men that encircled us. Maxie and I gawped and glared around and about us as Jeanette marshalled us through the near rapturous multitude who, hands in the air, were chanting along with the sweet and glorious mantra that was soaring out of the speakers. Am I ever going to fall in love in New York City? Will I ever find a home so far from Tennessee? There's no future in the single bars, nothing but the one-night stars. Am I ever going to fall in love in New York City? I stopped for a moment in the middle of the floor, in quiet disbelief beneath the spinning disco ball. This place was spectacular. Fuck me, this is amazing, I said to no one in particular. Where did they all come from? A striking blonde in a black vest, with collar-length hair and a moustache, danced past me languidly and brushed my face with his hand. Paradise, baby, he said with a long list of southern draws. That's where they all came from, paradise. Then he put his arm around my waist and encircled me before spinning me around and pulling me close to him from behind, rocking me back and forth to the music. What is this music? I said, half enchanted, half terrified, and looking around for Maxie and Jeanette, who were by now all the way across the other side of the dance floor. Grace Jones, baby, he said. She's a fucking goddess. Then he turned me around to face him, kissed me softly on the mouth, and evaporated into the crowd.